Well, hello, and welcome to the Fisher Poetry Podcast, a showcase of prose, poetry, and song written and performed by those in the commercial fishing community, mostly. I'm your host, Brad. Thanks for joining us today. For today's podcast, we have a real treat. We have a live Fisher poet on the line, Dennis McGuire from Port Townsend, Washington. Thank you, Dennis, and thanks for being on tonight.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So we're here tonight to talk about Dennis's book. And title of it, Dennis, is
It's
Calypso.
Calypso, Rhyme of the Modern Mariner,
Okay.
also
And
known as Ballad of Calypso.
ah,
Uh,
so tell us a little bit of, give us a summary of what this book is about.
well, the book is a is the logbook of the Calypso actually, and a little bit before we bought the boat. Uh, we uh, we bought the boat in Rhode Island, but we started out in Cordova, Alaska, Prince William Sound, and the fishery there, the herring roe and kelp fishery there, provided us with enough cash to travel across the country, buy a boat, a little boat in Portsmouth or in Newport, Rhode Island, at the Newport Used Boat Show. We fixed her up. I got into a little bit of fishing at Portsmouth, Rhode Island, as a diver, uh, quahogs, quahog clams, and then got the boat ready through the summer and headed south. We had really no idea where we were going. We thought we'd go to Bahamas, but it was September, so pretty late, and our boat was leaking badly. Engine wasn't running worth a darn, and we found out about the intercoastal waterway down in Long Island. We stopped in Long Island to patch up some leaks and found out about the intercoastal. So we took the intercoastal down to Florida. Then it takes us up into the Chesapeake and down through the swamps of North Carolina and Georgia, the savannas, and really beautiful countryside sailing, but also a lot of pain because of the bridges and situations you can get into in heavily trafficked, narrow waterways. And the ocean was always an option, so we would jump out occasionally and have to run. It was not like running the bars up north. It was more like running these jetty entrances, but they could get crowded and kind of hairy for sure. And so we made our way down to Florida. Had a few mishaps with trying to find employment, and then we were on ahead of way headed to Bahamas when we discovered the Mariel boat lift was underway. It was the Castro was letting people go. Refugees are pouring into the United States, and we were in a restaurant and found out that families would pay $1,000 a person that you could bring back. So Pat and I changed our plans from Bahamas to Cuba and sailed straight on out uh, with a fleet of fast boats. And we got out in the middle of the Straits of Florida and becalmed, naturally, sailing, and no engine because we'd gotten rid of the engine in Florida. We had $100 in cash we left the country with, and yeah, we didn't get to Mariel, Cuba. We met some fishermen, Cuban fishermen, and then we were boarded by a Cuban officer off a gunboat, and they pretty much kicked us out of the country. We're in Cuban waters. We're right out in front of Havana, actually, when they kicked us out. And so we sailed on. 2 weeks later, we were in Isla Mujeres, Mexico. Had a long, arduous trip across the Yucatan Straits. Then we gravitated. We went down to Belize, Yucatan coast, and along Mexico. There we went into a bay. We crashed a boat. Actually, we crashed a boat on the Yucatan Barrier Reef. Tried to get through there, and we made it. We got through, but boy, oh boy, as I came up hard aground on top of the reef, but then we got pushed over by the swell and got into safe water. And then we got down to Belize and hauled the boat, make repairs on that original leak that we left with. We'd been pumping, we probably pumped several thousand gallons by the time we got to Belize. And then we moved on from Belize. We made friends here and there, and we went down. Loved sailing. Belize was beautiful sailing, islands and shallow water. The boat was really well built for shallow water sailing. Then we cruised across to Honduras. We went to Isla Utila. We rode out a hurricane there, Hurricane Hermine, and then sailed on, had a horrendous sail to Roatan. It took us, was about only what, 20 miles or something. It took us 2 days. And then we sailed back north to Isla Mujeres because Cabo Gracias a Dios was our next major point to get around. And it was just upwind and hard going and dangerous reefs, very poor charts. So we just headed north, got to Isla Mujeres, picked up a friend, our friend Doug Milholland from Port Townsend. We sailed south, headed for Panama. It was 1,000 miles, Isla Mujeres to Panama. And we stopped in Nicaragua during the Sandinistas had just taken over, and then, which was pretty volatile time in Nicaragua. It got, having been in Vietnam and being between opposing forces there, I could see we were in a similar situation in Nicaragua. Of course, it was after the coup, and everything is kind of cooled off, but it wasn't as cool as we thought it was. So we ended up moving on, went to Panama. Doug bought a boat, Panama, beautiful little sailboat from Norway, and invited a lady down from Port Townsend, and they're still married today. That relationship lasted a long time. Pat and I headed on west, went through the canal, did a little business deal in Panama Bay there, and headed up, sailed smack into the doldrums, and we drifted. We drifted for 30 days. We drifted 600 miles. It was glassy the whole way and wonderful. It was just idyllic. We had fish always around the boat. We had all we could eat. We had lots of fruit and everything out coming out of Panama. So we wanted for nothing. We really, a little wind would have been nice, but we didn't really care if we got that. Then we got to the Gulf of Tehuantepec, which is a little narrow slice of land between the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of Tehuantepec in the Pacific. And the wind shoots through there. It's a well-known demon. It hit us like, oh, it probably hit us with an 80 mile an hour gust. I don't know, 70, 80, and knocked us all down. And luckily, we didn't have the sails up because there was no wind anyway. So we didn't have to worry about that. But we had some issues, definitely had some issues. It blew for 3 days. We ended up about 150 miles offshore. And then finally let up and pretty easy sailing the next day. That first following day was pretty easy. And we discovered that the whole nature of the sea, the color of the water, the wind, the air, everything was new, and we had entered the northeast trade winds, and we were bucking the trades because we had a spot picked out in the middle of the ocean between San Francisco and Hawaii, which was where we pointing our boat for it to where we make our tack back to the Straits of Juan de Fuca. But we pounded against that northeast trades for 30 days, and we made 600 miles in 30 days upwind, same as we made drifting in 30 days. So that was pretty interesting. Then we had to take stock of what we had. We weren't real short on water, but we weren't happy with how much water we had left because we were being pretty liberal with it, not realizing we were going to be out so long. So we had to tighten our belts on the water. Food was plenty. We had plenty of grains and food. It was not an issue. And fish under the boat never seemed to leave the boat. So that was not an issue. But we were packing. We knew we had to do something. We had to get to land. It had to be an issue. So we we're going to go to Mexico, but we had to throw off our what we'd bought in Panama was pretty illegal, so we couldn't bring it into Mexico. We wouldn't have to dump it. And we didn't like that idea, so we decided, well, we'll go for Hawaii. We threw the I Ching, actually, and I Ching is what turned us for sure. We turned west, and we sailed 30 days, 37 days, and we made 3,700 miles to Hawaii. So the total trip was 97 days out of Panama to when we tied up in Hilo. And Hilo, we found out we had major damage, so we made repairs. Typical wooden boat, you always doing something to them. And we made all the repairs. The Hawaiians were just super people, so helpful. They just took us under their wing. And we had just a wonderful, wonderful summer in Hilo, right there by the Suisun Fish Market in the little park there. That's where we hauled her out. And a fellow there, Sam Kumaka, he just took care of us, made sure everything, we had tools, made sure we had any supplies we needed. He made sure we'd get it. And that went really well. Then finally comes pretty close to September, late August. We did the aloha thing. It was like the boat's done. The last nail went in the night before, and paint on it and everything. And bang, we put her in the water, and flowers and leis and all the wonderful singing and everything. And the people that had been there all that time with us sent us off, hit the water, and away we went to headed for Washington. And so had 10 days, 1,000 miles of just wonderful sailing, broad reach, just wonderful sailing. 1,000 miles in 10 days. It was just like, this is never going to end. And then it ended. And September, we got hit with, the first storm is the cover on the book. This picture here, this is from the first storm out of Hawaii. I don't know if you can see this, but it's the cover of the book. If you find the cover of the book, you'll see it. Anyway, that's me and Pat flying around in the cabin of the boat. And it was like that pretty much the whole way. We pretty much, I think I said something there about sailing backwards. Never had a clue we'd be sailing backwards, but we did. We probably sailed backwards. Oh, I don't know, over 1,000 miles. We were hove to and just getting blown toward the Straits of Juan de Fuca. It was always going our way anyway, And Ernest Shackleton and those boys were our friends at that time. We kept channeling those people because the James Caird, we read about the James Caird, and there were 6 people in that 26-foot boat. So Pat and I felt, well, we got it pretty good. First of all, it ain't freezing. Okay, yeah, it's blowing a hurricane, but it ain't freezing.
Yeah.
And it was only two of us instead of six of us crammed in this little 26 footer, so we knew we had it better than them. And that was kind of a warm fuzzy blanket for us, knowing that somebody else had it worse, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's one of the one of the amazing things. Well, so reading the book, there are a couple of things that really impressed me. One is just how you wrote it. You wrote it in kind of a third person narrative form. So it's almost like someone was just kind of writing about all this stuff that was on a crow's nest or something. It could just be watching all this stuff going on and just kind of writing it down. And well, yeah, so we're up on top of the reef here and we're stuck, and then here's what Dennis did, and here's what Pat did, and then when you got to Hawaii, like you said, you had damage, and how everybody was really helpful. But it was just really interesting perspective to put it that
Right.
way. And
Well, oh, I
good.
just saying, I trying the way I wrote it was I tried to put the reader, think of it as the reader sitting at the helm with
Yeah,
the hand
yeah,
on the helm,
exactly.
and let them feel the spokes in their hand, and throwing the sheets, and hauling the sheets in, and adjusting sails on. I wanted people to try to feel that, or climbing a mast, what it is like to really
Hmm.
just shinny up a damn mast in a storm. It's not
Yeah,
easy.
yeah.
It's a struggle, and I try to get that feeling out there. And when I talk about, I mean, I talk about the pair, or I talk about the crew, or I talk about Calypso. But when I wrote it, as far as I'm concerned, all three were the same, of the same mind, or I don't know exactly how to say it, but the, those three terms, pair, the Calypso, and the crew. That could have been anything.
Hmm.
Of the three, they're all mixed together because they're integral part of each other.
Hmm.
Do you understand what I'm trying to
Yeah,
get at?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
difficult to put into words, but
No, no, but I think that's the interesting part of it is that you put that perspective in it, of that kind of third person, like you said, person at the helm, guiding the boat perspective, and that enabled you to write the book as an observer,
right.
not just this is happening to me, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that.
You
You know,
every
it
once in a while you'll find where I had to use her name, or use the
yeah,
word I, but I avoided it like the plague. I
yeah.
really did, because I felt like making a person like that, it just took something away from the book rather than adding to it.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
the other two things that stood out for me was one, how you interspersed the writings with basically the text, the narrative, with prose or poems or other little insets of
right.
poetry that you added to that.
Well, what
Yeah.
happened was, the poetry came first. I wrote the 445, or whatever it is, ballad poetry. I wrote it. There was nothing, no pictures. There was nothing, no prose, nothing. I wrote it straight through. You could rip that poem right out of that book and put it aside, and it would make all perfect sense. You'd learn about the whole trip
Yeah.
in sequence. But that the to expound on it with prose and stuff, that kind of made it a lot more fun.
Hmm.
And because there's a lot of things there that almost have to explain. The poems only kind of give you a light picture,
Yeah.
but you drill down on it with the prose.
Yeah, yeah, but it was a really, yeah, interesting to be catching that in the middle of all this narrative. And then the other thing, which is I think are the photos that you've got behind you, is the art that's in the book, and
Well,
that's all from Pat, right?
yeah, well, sure. You basically, I get up in the morning. Usually, I'm up at like 2:30 or 3 in the morning, and I write for 3 or 4 hours, and then I go back to bed, and then get up in the morning, have breakfast, and then I'll read to Pat what I was writing, and then a lot of times, believe it or not, I couldn't even read it. I just start bawling. I just break down, and start bawling. I mean, that happened to me. You can't believe how often that would happen. I couldn't get through it, and
Mm-hmm.
and
Because you're
get
experiencing it while
yeah,
you're talking
it
about
was
it.
real
Yeah.
close to me, closer than I thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then of course she'd get some vision from the what I wrote, and she come out with a poem, a nice drawing here 2 or 3 days later to be like, boom,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
just what her vision of what that scene was and what she remembered, just like the cover, flying around. That was off dropping off that 50 or 100 foot wave,
Uh-huh.
and the boat just dropped out from under us.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful book, and I really enjoyed reading it. Um, you're going to read for us some passages from the book,
Sure.
and if you're ready to do that,
Oh, let's see. I got one right here. I kind of this one this little thing I
I'll just
really
turn it over
happen
to
to
you.
like. Sure. This this one is pretty special for me and Pat and for some other people. Uh, we uh, we sailed out of Florida, like I telling you, and went to Cuba. Well, I'll just read it. Sailing to fluky winds has Calypso far offshore, with a massive vessel seen on TV nowhere in sight. Squally weather at times forces the crew to shorten sail for an hour or so, breaking up the calm periods and keeping the crew on their toes. The third day is airless, which holds her on a glassy drift, powerless, dead reckoning with the current and unsteady winds taken into consideration, has Calypso off course to the northeast. Content to enjoy the peace and quiet, confident the wind will return, the drift continues through the night and into the following afternoon, when a lone vessel is sighted, steaming directly toward them. And then we go to this heading here is Cuban fishing boat. Out front of Havana on this windless day, a fishing boat comes steaming our way. Side by side, rafted together, fishermen all were birds of a feather. An imposing sight, growing larger from its initial appearance, it becomes apparent from the rigging this is a fishing trawler. Even better, it is Cuban flagged. Calypso is in Cuban waters. The crew has no idea exactly where in Cuban waters, having been drifting and sailing in the Florida Strait for 3 days. Regardless, spirits soar with the only slight headwind of trepidation. The vessel sidles up cautiously, a jolly crew and captain laughing, waving, and shouting greetings in Spanish and English. What little apprehension the crew had initially felt evaporates as they raft up together and are invited aboard. The 5 young fishermen and 2 sailors fall into excited conversation in broken language. Big hugs and laughing, an instant bond of friendship is forged, not tempered an iota over the current and past political issues. The two crews knowing intuitively this moment is special, one to be cherished. Fishers from Alaska joining with Cuban fishermen. The language barrier, rather than a problem, encouraged animated, often hilarious conversation, describing each other's fishing techniques and big hauls with much exaggeration, as is common among fisher folk everywhere. The crew are treated to a wonderful tour from the fish hold to engine room and wheelhouse, winding up at the large galley table where there's plenty of room for everyone to sit and enjoy a sumptuous spicy fish stew with fresh baked bread and sweet black Cuban coffee. 7 people laughing, making all kinds of large gestures in an effort to convey their contribution to the conversation, which naturally winds around to the Mariel boat lift, for which this boat had been taken off the fishing grounds and put on patrol. Their belly laughs and are contagious, describing the hordes of people let loose from the jails to become refugees. Comic interpretations of the scene eliminated the need for words with this jovial crew. Our friends had dutifully rotating a watch. Our friends had been dutifully rotating a watch in the wheelhouse while the remainder visited in the galley. A wonderful time that would have been continued for hours comes to an abrupt end when the watch jumps down from his post, breaking into the conversation. Our hosts jump up once, excitedly rushing the two sailors back to their boat, tossing lines, cutting Calypso loose. On the horizon, a plume of black smoke can be seen, soon taking the shape of a large, speeding gunboat. With a bone in her teeth, white spray explodes from her bow as she dives headlong into the waves at 20 knots. Next heading, Cuban gunboat. Just having lunch, and to our dismay, there's a Cuban gunboat coming out of the bay. Our fishermen friends must say goodbye. No time for a mango pie. Let's go change subjects here. Let's go to Mexico. Yeah, this is kind of cute. This is the Southern Scrap, a fisherman, not a fisherman, a sailor we had met after we'd come into Isma Harry's. We met this fellow, Chris. Southern Scrap. There comes a stormy day when a fellow sailor sails into the bay, chock-a-block loaded to the gunwales with crap, a little yellow lifeboat, the Southern Scrap. An early evening gale arrives after Calypso's first couple weeks at anchor. The crew observes a curiosity blow in from the north, first appearing as a bright yellow dot with an array of color flashing intermittently atop, surrounded by white clouds of churning seas outside the harbor mouth. With impressive sliding down steep blue walls on her approach, she works her way into the smooth, protected waters of the bay. Dazzled by the bright colors of the tie-dyed, heavily patched mainsail, with matching jib and mizzen adorned with a huge yin-yang symbol, the crew stands, mouth agape, wordless. The bold entrance is followed up by a loud voice rising above the wind. Do I hear dinner noises, people? I hear dinner noises, people. The lone sailor drops sail, tosses the anchor, then dives into the water, stroking hard for Calypso. As the visitor swims, the crew is eyeing this oddity before them. A common steel 26-foot lifeboat, rust streaking down its bright yellow hull in many places. She has been converted to a sail and catch rig with a couple of shaky-looking sticks for masts. The main mast, mangled at the very top, appears to have suffered some severe damage. The sails are an artistic combination of tie-dyed sailcloth patched with a variety of materials, provoking the image of a hippie afloat. A lanky, deeply tanned swimmer clambers aboard, introducing himself in a German accent. I heard dinner noises, people. Do I hear dinner noises? The Southern Scrap of steel she's built, her patchwork sails a psychedelic quilt, a lively fellow cosmic quiz bouncing around in a never-ending state of bliss. Tortillas are put on and tacos appear in the short order from Calypso's galley. An obviously famished sailor dives in. Between mouthfuls, our visitor, Chris, relates stories of his nearly 3-week crossing of the Gulf, originating in New Orleans. He had experienced the same combination of infrequent trade winds, calms, and localized storm systems with which the crew was familiar. When asked about the mangled masthead, a most entertaining tale ensues. The impromptu dinner party descends into fits of uncontrollable laughter as Chris relates a story of the Southern Scraps passing under a Basque bridge en route to the Gulf of Mexico. The Southern Scrap, having no engine, was struggling to make her way under the open bridge. A tug pushing loaded barge upstream under full power washes her aside with impunity. Smashing into the side wall of the bridge, rocking wildly, the mast jams into the workings, tearing off the steel cap at its top. The little boat breaks free, leaving the cap stuck in the great wheel, the giant gear wheel, designed to open and close the bridge. Carried downstream by the current, clear of the bridge, Calypso So Chris describes the identical scene the crew had witnessed at the Melbourne Causeway. An endless line of cars smoking, screaming, and a bridge master laying on his horn in the Louisiana heat. Only difference, this bridge would not be operating anytime soon. The Southern Scrap had made certainty that a certainty. Recovering from the bridge story, the crew questions the low freeboard of his boat, to which they are treated to the inner workings of this free-spirited sailor. Televisions, radios, mix masters and clocks, shopping carts, toilet seats, hubcaps, and socks. A boatload of prime American trash, Calypso, cosmic cricks, gonna turn into cash. In his preparations, Chris had scoured garbage dumps, Goodwill, Salvation Army, and free stores for every imaginable piece of clothing, blankets, kitchenware, toys, and tools his little boat could hold. The crew, being invited over for a look, are greatly amused. The Southern Scrap appears as if she'd been filled with a front loader full of garbage, packed tight, then deck put on, and like a cap to seal it in. A shopping cart full of a wide variety of small items partially blocks the way below. Another full shopping cart loaded to the cabin roof comes next, with a third cart peeking out from the bow, stuffed tight. There is a spot on the port side clear enough for a body to lie down. A can of sterno with a coffee pot makes up the galley. Food stores are simply part and parcel of the garbage. It is simple matter to just dig around for a cracker, a can of Spam, or whatever the desired fare. Anyway, that's Chris. This is called Snowy Egret. Following day of a local fiesta, crew and cat are startled from their siesta. A snowy egret flutters in through the hatch, and for Woody and the boat cat, and an easy catch. On the cabin sole this bird alights, and Woody got it in his sights. In an instant that Yankee cat's there, giving this poor bird a lethal stare. Awakened one early August evening, the crew is startled from their siesta by a commotion in the cabin. Groggily focusing on the disturbance, they find Woody on the cabin sole between them, his nose inches away from a very fragile-looking snowy egret. The late afternoon sun streams through the hatch, shining on this fascinating, spellbinding scene. Woody, rather than pouncing on the intruder, which it would be his customary action, has stopped short, taking up a classic cat watch pose. Forepaws close together, body at rest. A slow, distinct purr fills the cabin. Uncharacteristically, his tail does not twitch. The egret now pulls one leg up, tucking it away. Its head begins to sway slowly in a graceful elliptical pattern. Woody continues his stone-like watch with a more subdued purr. This delicate little bird appears unconcerned, standing quietly on one leg with its audience, including the danger posed by a cat, inches away. With Woody's nose inches away, the bird closes its eyes and begins to sway. The catbird situation's tense. The crew's watching in great suspense. Woody kept cockroaches off the boat, chased away birds wanting to rest and float. Now the crew's seeing something strange occurring, 'cause Woody, the Yankee cat, is a purring. On one leg, Snowy Egret standing there, the other leg's tucked away somewhere. The little bird's head cocks to one side. The snowy egret stood there and died. The circular sway of the bird's long neck slows, the head coming to rest on the breast at a very odd, unnatural angle. The eyes close. The crew assumes the egret has fallen asleep when Woody's purr grows louder. He rises slowly, moving forward to the bird. The egret does not respond to its tender neck-to-neck caress. It does not open its eyes nor put down its leg to steady itself. Woody backs off, returning to his cat watch, reducing his purr to a point where it's barely audible. At long last, the crew understands the snow egret had come to Calypso to die. They feel deeply honored to witness this elegant death. Of what might have occurred, the crew is certain, but somehow Woody knew this bird was hurting. Because a purring cat with no tail twitching for a fight, it's not itching. How Woody was aware, even a guess we would not dare, but something else the crew could not was not understanding. How a bird could die and on one leg still be standing. Anyway, that's egret
Wow.
story. Yeah,
Yeah. That's a
yeah, that
great
was
story.
pretty amazing.
Dennis, that was a wonderful, thank you for
Sorry,
doing those
rough.
readings.
I'm kind of stumble over the reading off the cuff, but you guys get the idea.
Oh no, no, you did a great job. And those readings, the segments that you did are just very exemplary about the whole book. And I strongly encourage everyone to get a copy of the book. It's on Amazon, correct?
Yep, it's
And
on Amazon,
and
right? And your local bookstores,
and
they can order it.
mhm.
Hmm.
And I will provide a link to the Amazon bookstore so people can download it or check it out and or buy it, hopefully. So I just wanted to, I guess I should just close out here and say thank you very much, Dennis. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing us a little bit about your book and your story and um, just just how nice it is. And it's a great story, and I hope everyone gets a chance to read it and enjoy it and bring it in because that really is it's just a journey of a lifetime, you know. So
Yeah. Well, we're happy that we lived through it
yeah.
to write the story. We had plenty of opportunities to
Yeah.
not make it.
Okay.
You bet.
Well, uh, well, that's it. This one's in the tote. Uh,
Good.
we
Good
want to
deal.
thank Dennis McGuire again for appearing on today's podcast or this episode's podcast. And we have a video of this and other performances that we've recorded on our YouTube channel. You can reach me via email at the FisherPoetry at gmail.com, on Twitter at the FPP cast, and at the Fisher Poetry Podcast page on Facebook. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can make a donation via our podcast host, Anchor. Links to all of these are provided in the podcast description. Your support and comments are important to us and are greatly appreciated. The Fisher Poetry Podcast is written and produced by me, Brad Wortman. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to haul the latest episodes into your net. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.